We've already heard this week from the critics, and they have serious doubts that Miami's results on the field is going to match their talent level. Coaching is a big part of that, sure, but you also need your best players to step up.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and co-host of Locked On ACC. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode, we're going to talk about this idea that came from one of those anonymous ACC coaches talking about Miami, that Miami might not use Cam Ward correctly this year. I think they're wrong, and I'll tell you why. We've got another pivotal weekend of official visits coming up. Some of those visits were tweaked and changed a little bit due to player schedules, but Miami's got a huge opportunity to knock it out of the park with some of the best high school players in the country this weekend. But guys, I want to talk about the most important players on the team this year, because let's not forget, talent is a big part of this. You know, people will talk about, oh, your coach didn't take the knee. This guy's never heard of the victory formation. He doesn't know how to use his timeouts. Butch Davis, there were questions about his game day coaching. He ended up compiling arguably the greatest roster in college football history. Miami is trying to create, and I believe they're getting closer to this when it comes to the additions of talent they've made, excellent transfer portal class, top 10 high school recruiting classes in consecutive years. The roster's deeper than it's been in a long time. There's more competition at most positions than there's been in a very long time. And yes, you've got a handful of players who can become superstars this year, guys who are going to contend to be first team, second team All-ACC, first team, second team All-American. If Miami's going to get to where a lot of us think and hope they can get to this year, if you want to win the ACC or at least compete for an ACC championship, compete for a spot in the 12-team college football playoff this year, these are the players that need to step up and shine this season. Of course, it starts with Cam Ward behind center. Of course it does. He is the most important player on the team. Now, Miami, the last couple of years, had a quarterback who flashed in games where he was on. But on the flip side of that, multiple interception games, drive-killing, game-killing interceptions. Obviously, Miami needs to find more consistency from Ward than they did from Tyler Van Dyke. The good news is interceptions have not been an issue for Ward. There are fumbling questions, and I know he's been working on that throughout the offseason. But this is a guy who had a prolific couple of seasons at Washington State. I mean, last year, over 3,700 yards passing, 25 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Ward physically is able to do things that most quarterbacks in the college game are not able to do when it comes to his ability to extend plays, his abilities to improvise, the strong and accurate arm he has to get there. And what I've noticed from Ward since he's been here, folks, and the time that I've been able to cover Miami's new signal caller, is he's a natural-born leader. He takes a lot of initiative, and it's why, and we're going to talk about, again, the doubts that someone has about Miami actually tailoring the offense around him. Ward he's very collaborative, if that's even a word, when it comes to making coaches and making teammates understand what he does best, what plays he likes to run, what formations he likes to run. And I think it's going to work this year. I think it's going to work with Cam Ward behind center. And another reason why I think it's going to work with Cam is, you think about the offensive lines that he played behind the last couple of years, pretty shaky. And that's why, after Cam Ward, you would say most important player on the team. You could say anyone who's protecting him, right? Anybody from that offensive line. If you go down to, Jalen Rivers, who's going to be the left tackle starter again this year, Inez Cooper starting at right guard, Kiko Mauigoa starting at right tackle, Zach Carpenter starting at center, whoever the left guard starter is, whether that's Pancake Honcho or whether it's Matthew McCoy, keeping Cam Ward protected and giving him time to throw, keeping his jersey clean. Yeah. Can you imagine what Cam Ward can do behind improved protection this year? Because he had an excellent year last year behind a shaky Washington State offensive line. So Ward's got the luxury of protection, we think, that he didn't have at his last stop. So that's huge. I'm going to go with really probably after Cam Ward. I mean, I threw a shout out to the offensive line because they deserve it. But after Cam Ward, you think about most important player on the team this year, Kiko Mauigoa at linebacker. He was arguably the best player on the team last year, regardless of position, regardless of which side of the ball he played on. Kiko's instincts and his fundamentals, and he's a senior, he's a leader on the team. Kiko Mauigoa is one of the most well-rounded linebackers I've covered at this level. Solid in coverage, sound tackler, explosive behind the line of scrimmage. Maybe the next time Kiko tackles a quarterback in the end zone, they'll actually call it a safety, unlike what they did last year. But defensively, there are a handful of players. We'll talk about a couple more who are super important on that side of the football. But Kiko, that's the straw that stirs the drink on defense. He's one of the most important. Back to the offensive side of the football, I've got to throw a shout to Xavier Restrepo. X is heading into his final season as a Cane, 1,000-yard receiver last year. You'd be hard-pressed to find a more consistent player on this team, consistent on the field, consistent off the field with his work habits, sets a great example for his teammates. He's one of the team leaders, and I think Restrepo, I know a lot of people thought, well, with Tyler Van Dyke leaving, what's Restrepo? That was his BFF. What's Restrepo going to do? Folks, you need to just accept the fact that Xavier Restrepo is really good. And I saw him in practices in spring develop a similar sort of connection with Cam Ward on the field as to the connection he had with Tyler Van Dyke. X gets targeted a lot. X makes at least one circus catch per practice. X can jump really high. A lot of people don't realize how much vert this dude has. And I think he's one of the most important players on the team this year. Back to a couple of guys on the defensive side of the football. People look at Miami's defensive secondary just based on the overall youth and inexperience of that unit. People think that could be the question mark or that could be the liability. Now, someone who is not inexperienced, he's very experienced, and I think it's one of the most important players on the team this year, is cornerback Daryl Porter Jr. DP, he's heading into his final year at Miami. He allowed 0 touchdowns in coverage last year, graded out 12th overall among ACC cornerbacks last season. And, Porter with a pretty young defensive secondary because, he doesn't have Cam Kinchins in that defensive backfield anymore as one of the leaders on the team. There's going to be more responsibility for Porter, and I think he's going to make the most of that this year. I think he's one of the most important players on the team. And the last guy that I'm going to shout out here, and I'm going to take some of the tweets or the X posts that you guys have been sending me, Rueben Bain Jr. I have to throw him in this mix. Coming off of the year that he came off of as a true freshman last season and knowing how much of a leader by example he is on this team, Rueben Bain, I put him in this mix. One of the most important players on the team, was co-leader on the team last year with 7.5 sacks, second on the team with 12.5 tackles for loss. Keep in mind, that was as a true freshman, a guy who didn't begin the year as a starter, but ended up starting, I think, I want to say the final 10 games of the season, final 9 or 10 games of the year, got a starting job, never let it go. And Rueben Bain is also, he's versatile enough to move inside on passing downs where he can open things up for his teammates. So Bain this year, and even if he does get more attention from opposing offenses, you can understand if that would be the case. I think Miami has enough talent in other spots around him that you can only focus so much on Bain. I think he's going to have a huge year this coming season. And I threw this out there on our X account at Locked On Canes. And by the way, you follow us on Locked On Canes, we will follow you back. We'll throw you a follow back. Who are the most important Canes football players heading into this coming season? And I like this. Audie says, hey, the men protecting Cam Ward. Not going to argue. He's got Samson and Cece there on that picture. Pancake Honcho and Mr. Mauigoa. We even got a reply here, and there was nothing sarcastic about this. Got a reply from my guy Brandon Olson from Locked On Gators, who gave me a real answer. He says Cam Ward, of course, Rueben Bain, and Francis. Now I'm not sure if he meant Francis or Francisco, if he meant Cece or Kiko. Either way, both the Maui Noah brothers are going to be super important this coming season. I appreciate that from Mr. Olson. Phil says Cam Ward, Zaquan Patterson. He says Elijah Arroyo. And you know, with the Zaquan Patterson thing, I don't want Patterson to be in the position as a true freshman to be one of the most important players on the team. And that's not saying I don't think Zaquan can get on the field, can earn some playing time and do big things. I just, you would hope that other more experienced players in the defensive secondary, and there are more experienced safeties. Obviously, Mish Powell, whether he plays nickel or safety, is going to be a really important player this year. Jaden Harris, Markeith Williams, guys like that. So it's like, I'm not saying I don't think Zaquan can have an impact as freshman. I don't want to put it on him his first year to be one of the most important players on the team. But I think the Elijah Arroyo shout out is a good one. Arroyo, his health has been his worst enemy the past couple of years. He's fully healthy now. Knock on wood, he stays that way. And Arroyo at tight end had a really good spring where he looked like the best tight end on the team. So I can definitely roll with you on that one. Scott says Cam Ward, last year with better quarterback play, would have been a great season for Miami. This team will be better. I agree. Jay Zone says Ward, Restrepo, Damien Martinez, Rueben, Bain. Petey says Zach Carpenter, Cam Ward, Jacoby George, Rueben, Bain. And I don't know if he means Damari Brown or Sam Brown, but Brown just gets a shout out. Either way. An Adnan says Cam Ward, anyone on the O-line, and Rueben Bain. So one thing you notice, a lot of people have certain different answers and shout outs that you will throw in. I'm pretty sure everyone, if not 99% of the people who responded to that social media post, they all have QB1, Cam Ward, right there in that mix. And we'll circle back and talk a little bit about Cam Ward, a little bit more about Cam Ward on this episode. But I want to talk about a big weekend of official visits at Miami coming up next, because, folks, we just had a round of OVs this past week. You've got one this coming weekend, and then the next final two weekends of June. This is the time Miami's coaching staff and recruiting staff gets to lay those foundations. If you want to have a top 10 class for the third consecutive year, this is a huge weekend coming up. We'll cover it right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. And I already know you're keeping it locked to Game Time. This is the only ticket app that I use. If you're looking for NHL Stanley Cup Finals tickets for our South Floridians here, Florida Panthers are taking on the Edmonton Oilers starting at home this Saturday. You can get the best prices on tickets, even last-minute tickets to that game at Game Time. And if you're attending the NBA Finals out of market, how cool would it be to go to a game? Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Guys, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Guys, the all-in pricing is a game changer. This is why I don't use any other ticket services, because Game Time shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. They also give you a panoramic view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you're going to be looking at from your angle, whether you're at a concert, a show, a game. You're going to know exactly what you're going to see from your seat, which is so important. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this Hump Day episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Hey guys, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Guys, Miami, it's pretty incredible. When you look at over the course of the 4 official visit weekends that started last week and are heading out throughout the month, you've got a handful of 5-star prospects visiting throughout this month, and a who's who list of some of the top players in the country. Miami has the top defensive lineman in the country on campus this weekend. And it's a player that, if you go by the recruiting services and the experts, they're not currently trending out front for this guy, but every official visit is an opportunity to change that narrative, to make a move, and to gain steam. And when you talk about the biggest name who's going to be on campus this weekend starting Friday, there is none bigger this weekend than five-star defensive lineman Elijah Griffin. He's the fourth-ranked player in the entire country and the top-rated defensive lineman in the class. Now, the reason why Miami is trying to probably make up some ground here is Griffin plays at Savannah Christian Prep, and the home state Georgia Bulldogs have been considered favorites in his recruitment. And of course, he is going to be making a Georgia OV before his process is over this month. But this is someone you remember early in March. I think it was March 8th during Miami Hurricane spring football. Elijah Griffin made an unofficial visit down to campus, and he was pretty blown away. And I heard a lot of good feedback about how that unofficial went. And so the official is a completely different animal. I mean, you talk to players who make the unofficials and then they come back for the official, like Byron Lewis being an example of that. Now, he's local out of American Heritage. So when he comes down for unofficial visits, he's driving down, then he's driving back home that same day. Once you get the fully immersive experience, staying at the recruiting hotel and, really kind of living, around campus for a couple of days, it was like a different world for him. I spoke to Byron over the weekend, and he told me it was a fantastic visit to Miami. He and his family absolutely loved it. And that seems to be a player Miami is making positive waves for, that 4-star running back out of Heritage. And Miami's going to try to have a similar effect on 5-star defensive tackle Elijah Griffin. This is a huge opportunity for Jason Taylor and Joe Salavea, Miami's defensive line coaches, to pick up where they left off in defensive line recruiting last season. And you better believe Griffin is aware of what Miami did on the trail in the last cycle, pulling off the best defensive line class in the entire country. There is momentum that comes from that. And as a side note, by the way, two of those top guys from the class of 2024, 5-star defensive tackle Justin Scott, 4-star defensive tackle Artavius Jones, they're on campus now. They just enrolled within the past week. Justin Scott, of course, was actually the highest ranked recruit in Miami's entire class. And Artavius Jones, that dude, I mean, if you watch his tape, it speaks for itself. There's a reason why they call him the Juggernaut. But then you start seeing photos of him around campus. The guy is an absolute Goliath, and I cannot wait to watch Artavius Jones play. And Elijah Griffin is he's no small man either. He's 6'5", about 285 pounds. He's the size of a defensive tackle who moves like a fast twitch defensive end. Of course, when you can find a special athlete like Griffin at that size, that's why he's a 5-star player and one of the top players in the entire class, because he has that rare combination of size and explosion. Because obviously at 6'5", 280, and this is 285 heading into his senior year of high school. By the time he hits a college campus, I would imagine he's going to be in the 300 plus range still with that sort of quickness and athleticism. That's why a player like that gets so highly valued, because he's a unicorn. He's an absolutely rare athlete. A player that Miami has been trending positively for and will look to continue that is 4-star linebacker Gavin out of IMG Academy. He's made several trips, unofficials, to Miami. He's going to be around for his OV this weekend. Nix, 6 foot tall, 225 pounds. Florida State, and Oregon are also heavily in the mix for Nix. See what I did there? But Miami could try to separate themselves this weekend. And, I also, anytime you see players from IMG Academy, you get a little excited, because you remember a couple years ago, 2 cycles ago, Miami landed a handful of very good players from IMG. We can see how effective players like Francis Mauigoa and Riley Williams at tight end have already been and can be here. It'd be great to reopen that pipeline, because IMG, boarding school that just is a magnet for top talent around the country. Gavin Nix is really, really good. Derek Nicholson, Miami's linebackers coach, is a recruiter, has been very aggressive on this one. And that's another one. This is, Miami has so many assistant coaches that have just been busting their butts on the trail, and D. Nick deserves mention in that regard as well. Another top linebacker that's going to be visiting is 4-star Jadon Perlotte. He's out of Georgia. This is someone I've seen Miami chipping away at. He's out of Buford, Georgia. He's actually committed to the home state Georgia Bulldogs. So this is one Miami would be trying to flip. He's committed to Georgia, but he's got a full month of official visits. He just visited Alabama last week. He's visiting Miami this week. Afterwards, he's got trips to Auburn, to Tennessee, and to Georgia, where he's committed. So it's basically Miami versus half the teams in the SEC on this one when it comes to Jadon Perlotte. If someone can flip him from Georgia. Miami's got a handful of important offensive linemen coming in for visits this weekend, including 4-star offensive tackle Jalen Matthews. This is someone I think Miami really likes. 6'5", 295 out of Toms River, New Jersey. Want to see if we can get our guy. Is Toms River, is that close to Newark? I don't. New Jersey's small, right? It's all like one community. We'll see if our guy Mark Caesar can help recruit this dude to Miami. The on-3 trends do show him favoring Tennessee right now, for what that's worth. So Miami's going to try to make a move. Miami also has 4-star interior offensive lineman Cortez Smith visiting. He's considered a Georgia lean. He's going to be here. By the way, you notice that there are he's from Georgia as well. There's a ton of players from the state of Georgia that are going to be visiting this. This is like a Peach Week at Miami or something. It's like from the oranges to the peaches. You got a bunch of these Georgia players coming up. So it looks like there have been certain visits that, just based on what players have going on, 7-on-7 tournaments. In the case of Luke Nickel, he actually moved his visit from later to this weekend. Luke Nickel, Miami's committed quarterback, is visiting this weekend because he's got the later this month, he's got the Elite 11 finals. And it looks like a couple of the receivers that were supposed to visit Miami had to move their visits to a later date. Miami was supposed to have 4-star receiver Dallas Wilson, who's committed to Oregon, but Miami's been working to flip him. 5-star receiver Jamie French. They were supposed to come down this weekend, but they're both involved in a big 7-on-7 event. They're playing in the OT7 finals. It's a huge 7-on-7 event this weekend. And I know in the case of Dallas Wilson, so he told Kane Sport, Stephen Wagner at Kane Sport reported this, that Wilson, he's going to be moving his visit just back 1 week. He said he's going to move his visit back from this weekend to the weekend of June 14th. I'm not sure when French is going to make up his visit, but Dallas Wilson is going to put that one off by 1 week. So, guys, I want to talk on the other side about how Miami needs to use Cam Ward properly this year, because there's at least one anonymous coach in the ACC who doesn't think Miami will. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In fact, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. We were talking last segment about how hard Miami's assistant coaches work on the trail. Jason Taylor and Joe Salavea got themselves the top defensive line class in the country last year, talking about how relentless linebackers coach Derek Nicholson is on the recruiting trail. I don't want to leave out Kevin Beard, right? KB, Miami's wide receivers coach, he was mentioned earlier this week. Coach Smoke Dixon, who does the college football recruiting show for 24/7 Sports, he actually named Kevin Beard as one of the top 3 recruiters in the entire country, right? And gosh, you got to hope that KB, what's his encore going to be after last year? And I know obviously there's a lot of publicity for the guy that Miami didn't get, because Jeremiah Smith, ultimately stuck with his Ohio State commitment. But with what Kevin Beard did get, getting Josiah Trader, Nikar, Chance Robinson, trio of top-level 4-star wide receivers in the same class. we're not used to that in recent years, getting that sort of a wide receiver class. These guys all coming in at the same. That's what Miami used to do in recruiting, right? And especially with how, prior to Shannon Dawson getting here, how stale Miami's offense had looked in the 2022 season, would be difficult to get a recruiting haul like that at wide receiver. So I can't wait to see what Kevin Beard's encore is going to be. If that may involve players like Cortez Mills, like Josh Moore, like Tyler Williams, like Dallas Wilson. Can Miami sneak to the top with Jamie French? I know Jamie French has been, Miami's in its top 3, but it seems like Texas, LSU are the top 2 in front of Miami. I cannot wait to see what Kevin Beard's follow-up is going to be to what he did last week, because KB has been honored as one of the top 3 recruiters in the entire country, and you love that for Kevin Beard. We talked yesterday about some anonymous quotes that ACC coaches, they spoke to Athlon Sports talking anonymously about their conference rivals. And it seems like whoever these unnamed coaches are, they went out of their way to say really nice things about most programs. They took the gloves off when they were talking about Miami. I don't need to revisit what they were saying about, we think the problems are on the sidelines, coaching are the problems. I feel like the only way for us to shut them up is to go out and win on the field this year. But one of those anonymous coaches said something interesting about the quarterback position. The TVD experiment is over, he said, and it's on them to fit their offense to Cam Ward, not the other way around. That kid has an established skill set that can help them, so they shouldn't try to make him accommodate their playbook. I can tell you with a high level of confidence, Miami, from Shannon Dawson to Mario Cristobal on down, they understand that, right? They understand that this is a special quarterback where you don't want to try to put a square peg into a round hole and make this player fit something that isn't optimal or comfortable for him. I mean, first of all, there's a certain level of comfort, I think a high level of comfort from Cam Ward in the type of offense Shannon Dawson wants to run to begin with, right? Dawson comes from that air raid coaching tree, and basically every offensive coach Ward has had during his college career, maybe even back to his high school career, I'm not sure, but at the college level in 4 years, Cam Ward has always been in air raid type of system. So there's a certain amount of comfort level to begin with, but you also get it when you have a quarterback who shows as much initiative as Cam Ward shows, who is as active when it comes to doing off-schedule workouts and throwing sessions with teammates, and as collaborative as Cam Ward is with his teammates and coaches. I do not expect that to be a problem. Miami's not going to be having Cam Ward run plays that he's not comfortable with while avoiding plays he is. No, I'm already seeing the adaptation, right? Anybody who was out there watching spring practices, anybody who watched the spring game, which was pretty easy to access, even if you weren't in Coral Gables in person to watch it, you probably found the stream on YouTube or ACC Network. If you're a Miami fan, you probably watched that spring game. And at any point during that spring game did you said, man, they're holding Ward back, right? And that comes, by the way, in a spring game where you're showing very little, if anything, from your playbook. So, no, I'm not worried about Miami giving the reins to Cam Ward. I think they understand it. In fact, I think the reason Miami's in the position they're in, where they've been so aggressive in the transfer portal, is because they were so blown away from January through April into how well Cam Ward has done so far at Miami. They want to make sure they maximize that 1 year. They want to maximize the time, which is just one season that he has here, and surround him with as much talent as possible, surround him with as much talent as he needs to go out there and produce results on the field. So I'm not worried about that. Listen, now obviously it's up to Shannon Dawson to call the right plays on Saturdays. It's up to Cam Ward to execute those plays. So that still has to happen for 12 plus Saturdays and a couple Fridays this coming season. But as far as the approach, as far as the attitude Miami has towards Cam Ward, I'm not worried about that whatsoever. They are going to collaborate with this man to allow him to be in the positions he needs to be in to succeed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel. We will be back throughout the week with updates, and we'll talk more about the recruiting weekend coming up. So thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.